Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome back to Tekpon. Today, our guest is Patric, the founder of Favro. Hello,
Hello, how's it going? Hello, everyone.
nice to meet you. Please tell us what your company does.
Well, so Favro is a enterprise grade platform for collaborative planning. So everything that has to do with planning work and collaborating between teams, and it's specifically designed for companies that are doing software as a service or games as a service. A lot of our clients are quite new game companies or also companies in game industry has been around for a while, like Electronic Arts, who are
Yeah,
today in practice doing games as a service. So it's really designed to make sure that when you're doing your kind of planning, you do this in a way that have teams to be more empowered, your organization to be more flat. Most of our customers, they used some other tools before. I mean, you got everything from, Asana, to Jira, and they all have their benefits. But Favor is specifically designed for companies that wants to have a more, flat organization, more decentralized, more autonomous teams, and they also want to have like a culture, around that, instead of the typical traditional kind of like centralization that you see with pretty much every other tool.
I understand. I saw you replace a lot of tools. You said that on the website, so it's fantastic. What are the problems that enterprise teams face nowadays?
I mean, I would say it's two main things. I mean, the first is hybrid work, and this was a trend that happened already before COVID. Companies were increasingly using distributed teams, but COVID obviously accelerated this. And now, people aren't going back to the old way of working, where everyone's being in the office. It's typically some level of hybrid work. And for that to be successful, you need to have teams that are, highly autonomous, both on a team level and on a individual level. So I think this is one of the big things that companies need to address because it means that um, your main place of work is no longer, in the office and, being important, how the office is shaping your culture. Your main place of work now is online, which means that, the tools that you choose are going to shape your culture. So if you choose, tools that are, let's say, very focused on centralization, well, that's the culture you're going to get. And if you choose tools that are very focused on decentralization, well, then that's the culture you're going to get. So,
Yeah,
so that's the first problem. The second problem is that basically everything is becoming software as a service. Games, other software, and I mean big enterprises. Everyone's basically going in this direction. And some companies are, born this way, and some bigger enterprises have been around for a long time. I mean, they are step by step getting into this. And software as a service are creating some new challenges. You need to think about, how do you um, basically, how do you release not only from a software point of view, but the whole company? It's not only that you will release something every week from a product point of view, it's also going to be from a marketing point of view, from an operational point of view, from a community point of view. And all these teams need to be in sync. Versus, in the old days, it would be much more of a, let's say, a traditional, let's say, waterfall where, okay, product, and then, okay, we need to think about marketing and so forth. So it's a very, it's a much more, intense reality today that companies need to face.
understand. What are your most loved features?
Well, I mean, there's many, but I think one of them is that Favro is very different from any other tool in the way that um, but we have this thing called cards, which is basically where you will write down your objective and your tasks and everything. And these cards, they can exist in many places at the same time. So this becomes important, for collaboration because you might have, let's say, something that the product team needs to deliver on. So this objective has a workflow that this card travels through from a product point of view, but also it will have something from, let's say, a marketing point of view. So the same card will travel through a different workflow, but for marketing. And both of these teams, they can see, where is this from the perspective of product or marketing or anything else. So everyone can understand, how does this fit into the bigger picture? Um, and and with other tools, what happens is that you typically have basically different tools being integrated with each other. In Favor, it's actually not different, data objects being integrated. It's actually the same data object. And what this creates is one of the fundamental principles of Agile, which is to bring people together rather than chopping things into small pieces. So whereas most platforms or tools, they will chop everything into pieces and distribute it, and everything becomes very siloed. In Favor, it's the opposite. It brings it together.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I was curious to know how important are templates for your customers.
Um, I think it's different between different customers. The way we approach it is that uh, we have a template gallery that we quite recently released,
Yeah.
that gives you templates that are basically based upon best practices.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you like a flying start. So even though Favor is kind of like a box of Lego pieces where you can really do whatever you want to organize, this gives you a much faster way to simply get started and deliver. But what we see is that companies, they create, they use this capability we have where you can edit these templates and you basically create your own library. Because many companies are in many ways like a set of best practices that they have put into these templates. So very often what happens is that they will create their own library, and then their teams will pick from their library. So we give them the flying start. They can take one of these templates and they can modify it into the way they work, and then the rest of the teams can use that.
That's awesome. That's why I asked, because I've known multiple companies that really differentiate with using templates that are really helpful for customers because they do not have to start from scratch.
Exactly.
I love to hear the use cases of your product. You already mentioned software as a service and games as a service, but tell us more.
So let's take the game example here, which I think is applicable also to SaaS companies and enterprises. You will have a product team, and most of our customers, they're a little bit bigger organizations. So the team will really, in practice, be a team of teams. So the first use case is basically like, how do every individual team plan their work and being empowered to break down like how to do certain objectives. They can do this themselves, which is obviously one of the agile principles. But then they need to collaborate with each other. There's typically like a bigger backlog, bigger product backlog of what is this? So from more of, let's say, a manager point of view, they need to, let's say that you're a product owner. Favor has very, very powerful product backlog capability, and they will be able to groom that backlog. But instead of micromanaging the teams, they can be more of a facilitator. Now, I should probably also say here that if we're talking about some like really big clients, often they use some kind of framework, and the Favor's the most famous framework is the scaled agile framework, SAFe, and SAFe was just released in its latest iteration called SAFe 6.
Mm-hmm.
And Favro is probably the best platform for SAFe 6, because SAFe 6 is much more flow based than previous versions of SAFe, and Favro is exactly designed that way. So we actually are we're just going to release now templates for SAFe 6, and if that's what you want to do, Favor is a great option. So there you have like the team level collaboration between, then you have like the more manager level, portfolio level. But in most of these cases, both game developers, SaaS companies, anyone, they typically use a lot of external developers. So when external development goes bad, it's kind of like when you feel like you're throwing things over the wall. And what we want to really support is making them feel like an extension of your team. So it's like truly collaborative planning, with those external developers. So Favor is really good at that. So that's one of the use cases. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, it's not only about the product development, it's also, the marketing. If I look at how marketing is done at most of our customers, the way they kind of plan and execute looks more like a software development team. Using Scrum or Kanban or Scrumban, than kind of like, old school marketing organization. And then you have ops, you have HR. I mean, we even have a lot of customers using Favor for sales. We do it
Well,
ourselves, but we actually have clients doing that as well. And then finally, you have the top level. So if you think about, a game publisher, they will have a portfolio perspective. It's like, okay, how do we plan on more of a portfolio level? And, Favor is really great for that too. So there you have like a bunch of use cases in most of our clients' case. It's a combination of many of these things that I mentioned. It's very seldom just one of these. It's typically a combination of all or some of these cases that I just mentioned.
thank you for sharing. And what is the pricing for Favro?
So very typical, per user, per month. We have standard plan, we have enterprise plan. I mean, typically, it's like $8 per user per month. Enterprise, it's a little bit more. Most of our enterprise clients, they have a lot of users, so we typically make kind of like a master services agreement with them, so they will have some discounts.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's you can step. We even have a light plan if you want to go really cheap. So it's we don't have a free plan today, but we are introducing a free plan very soon. So for the ones who want to step in on that, that's going to be an opportunity as well.
why did you decide to introduce a free plan?
It's not so much about getting. I mean, our typical customer is typically any team which is like a team of teams. I mean, that's
Hmm.
where Favor really becomes very different from the other products in the market when it's a little bit bigger. So I mean, I guess the question is, why did we not? Why did we not introduce a free plan earlier? And it was simply because most of our typical customer is just like a little bit bigger.
I
Um,
understand.
but we wanted to, we have just a lot of requests for it, and we thought it would be stupid to actually not have that option. So that's why we're introducing it this summer.
What are most used integrations and how important are those to your customers?
So I think one of the most used integrations are Jira integration. So we probably have one of the deepest integrations with Jira in the market. We
Hmm.
both have Jira Cloud, Jira on-premise, and Jira Data Center. And so we have all of them, and it's all certified on the Atlassian marketplace. And companies have been around for a while. I mean, they typically run Jira, and maybe some of the users, they simply want to switch from Jira to Favro, but you're still going to have a lot of users, especially like quality assurance in IT, that they want to continue to use Jira, and then with this integration, it's a two-way sync. They're able to basically connect what they're doing in Jira, with what they're doing in Favro, and Favro then being used by other people in the organization, like marketing, managers, some of the developers, etc. So that one is very popular. Then also I would say Slack, the Slack integration. I mean, we use Slack ourselves. We use the Slack integration ourselves, and we definitely have many customers that are using the Slack integration. And then we have many more integrations, but I would say those two are probably the most common.
That's super interesting. The Jira integration, well, super interesting. I didn't know that. When did you start the company and why did you choose to solve this problem? Why did you choose this niche?
So my two fellow founders and I, we built another company before, um, that was one of the leading platforms for very large scale, industrial, software development. I mean, we were in the visionary quadrant of Gartner's Magic Quadrant for agile application lifecycle management, like very long and boring term for it. But I mean
Yeah.
that's where it was. But this was an on-prem tool. So we were, that was the on-prem space. And we learned a lot from building this very successful company where we thought, okay, well, one, how can we do something which is still enterprise grade, but being on the cloud instead of on-prem? Secondly, how can we build something that brings the agile way of working to the whole organization, not just software development, because we saw that was a very strong trend. And thirdly, if you're going to do that, I mean, what is the best way of doing it? And this is how we came up with that. Okay, well, it really has to be about, highly autonomous teams that are aligning towards company goals in an autonomous way, rather than, like what everyone else is doing, which is super centralization.
Yeah.
So we just felt like, why haven't anyone done, like an enterprise grade platform on the cloud, which is actually living up to the agile principles, because it feels like, companies want, they're spending tons of money on consultants, wanting to be more agile, and have all these strategic initiatives around that. But then, when they pick their tools, they do things that are, kind of counterproductive to the agile principles. And of course, one of the reasons is because there was just no tools out there for it. So I mean, we thought this is a great reason to start a company, addressing this particular challenge.
Yeah. Have you raised any funding?
Yes, I mean, we have some of the best VC. I mean, our biggest external investor is Crandom, who is behind companies like Spotify, ISO. I mean, they're amazing. I think actually one of their funds is the most successful VC funds in Europe ever. So having those guys on board is great. We also have, Practica, which is the top VC in the Baltics. We get Scale Capital out of, they're like a Danish/Silicon Valley fund. And we also have, many, well, not many, we have some, private individuals that are very strong, serial entrepreneurs that, believe in what we do. And having them on board, even, I mean, obviously their checks are a little bit smaller than these institutional VCs, but having them on board is fantastic because I have like a reason to call them and say, hey, can I get your feedback on this thing, and that's extremely valuable.
I'm super happy for you. How big is your team right now?
So I mean, the team is still quite small. I mean, we're like 25 people. We're not so big, but we eat our own dog food. We're distributed first, so we have people in Vietnam. We got people in Ukraine. We actually hired in Ukraine even during the war.
Wow.
And we have people in Croatia. We have in Lithuania. We have in Sweden. We have in the US. So yeah, it's a I mean, we do meet from time to time. We call it we're like, instead of doing offsites, we're doing onsites.
Mm.
And we actually have one coming up very soon, where we will meet between like the Swedish team and the Lithuanian team, in Sweden, in Uppsala.
Yeah.
But I mean, we are truly distributed first ourselves.
What has been your best growth tactic for gaining new customers?
Well, I mean, to be honest, this is a bad answer, but it's really people talking to each other. I mean, the game industry is very big. I mean, it's the biggest media industry today, and it's bigger than music. It's bigger than movies. But it's also a very small industry. I mean, people know each other, and people that are producers, they talk to each other, and I would say our absolutely strongest sales mechanism are people when they move company, they say, hey, I knew Favro since before, it's going to be great for this company, or they heard about it. I mean, I know one of our really big customers, I'm not going to say the name, but a very, very big publisher. I mean, they became a customer because they knew the guys at this like super cool game startup, which was across the street, and I think they were literally out drinking beer, and they're like, oh, shit, we need to work. They were using, some of the older tools that we've been talking about before, and they were like, there must be something better out there. And they're like, well, haven't you tried Favro? And like, no, we never heard about it, and then they just, they download our free trial, and they get started, and then we start talking with them, and boom, we got a new fantastic client. So I mean, I would say, I mean, we're still a relatively new company, so this is still our most important way of spreading the word.
What has been your biggest challenge since starting the company?
I think one of the biggest challenges is what's actually happening right now in the market, where a lot of companies, the bigger ones, they've been laying off a lot of people, and that makes people a little bit conservative and afraid to try new things. If they have just let go of some people, then spending money on a new tool, the optics of that might not look great internally, so they might be a little bit careful. So, there are some companies that really would like to start using Favro, but they say, hey, our procurement team says you cannot buy anything right now. Let's talk. In 6 months. It can also be that, they're I mean, obviously, we're like, the new thing, we're, the future of production and game development and SaaS, versus you have, things like, Jira, which is very established. So you're gonna have
Yeah.
like IT teams saying like, let's just buy what we know. So I think that's the biggest challenge. It's like, when companies are being like, full throttle forward, it's much easier to have a conversation with them about doing something more future oriented, versus now a lot of people are thinking a little bit kind of traditional. So I think that's the biggest impediment for our growth right now.
I'd love to hear your full story. So how you started your career and yeah, just go back from the beginning.
Well, so I'm a third time CEO now, so I'm getting old. Um, and before that, I was studying, but I was also working in the military. I was working in the Swedish Air Force as a leadership instructor, and also, I'm a second lieutenant with the Air Force Light Infantry. So I was also, teaching, those kind of platoons. Um, and I thought that was actually, I learned a lot from that. Um, Organization and leadership in the military is actually not that different from software development teams. I mean, small autonomous teams that needs to handle uncertainty. Does that sound familiar? So it's I learned a lot during that time that's been super useful in my career in software development. So that was really great. When I studied, I mean, obviously technology, but I also studied business administration, economics, and I think probably social psychology was the most fun thing I studied. It was so interesting to study social psychology, and I had so much use for it, later in my career, because in many ways, I mean, when you're building tools for helping organizations to organize themselves better, I mean, in the end of the day, it's all about people. It's like how can people work better together?
Exactly.
And I mean, social psychology is, you know, then you kind of go a little bit deeper into the roots of like, well, how do people work together?
Yeah.
So that's my background. I come from a small town in Sweden. And as I said, I moved to Uppsala to study. I mean, also my background is a lot. I mean, I've been doing like a ton of traveling. I mean, obviously, I've been not doing a ton of traveling for work in my last two companies. But I do travel a lot. Also when I'm not working. I love diving, so I had a childhood dream to go to Galapagos Islands, and I fulfilled that dream finally. Just after New Year's this year, and I went to Galapagos Islands, and I was living on a boat with 11 other divers for 10 days. It's just doing like four dive or more dives per day. It's like
Wow.
so intense. So yeah, it's I don't know if I wouldn't do this, maybe I should be a diving instructor. That would be fun as well.
Thank you so much for the transparency. What's your best piece of advice for a starting founder?
Oh, I'm gonna be very careful with giving advice. I mean, the simple thing. that probably a lot of people will say is that if you do something that you're passionate about, the chance that you will be really good at it is high. And I mean, no one should have any illusions that, I mean, if you're starting a company, you have to be like ridiculously good at what you do. It's just, you know, it's just because all your competitors, they will have all the volume advantage, the brand advantage. They have every advantage to you. So you need to be extremely good, and to be even having a chance to be extremely good, you have to be very very passionate about what you do. One thing that helps succeeding with that is to be narrow. Um, in my own experience, but also with entrepreneurs that I have invested in myself. Very often, when they think they're being narrowly focused on a niche market part of the market, there still can be way more niche, and if you're very targeted, if you're very niche, it's easier with limited resources to be very good. You can capture the rest of the market later. It's not like, if you zoom in on a very narrow part of the market, that's not, it doesn't define you for the rest of your career. It's just, you have to win something. You have to be the best in the market at some, in some niche. And if you can win that, well, then you can start thinking about, well, what's going to be the next niche, and so forth. So that would be my advice, that, well, first, if you're not truly passionate about what you do, don't even try. And secondly, once you have found that, well, then be like 3 times as more, niche than you think you need to be, because that's the key.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. I have one last question for you. What's your favorite SaaS product apart from Favro?
I mean, this is going to be a super boring answer, but Slack,
You
also,
mentioned, yeah, we
okay,
talked
maybe
about it.
Discord. I mean, I'm a gamer myself, so maybe Discord. But I mean, what I really love about Slack is that we have replaced all internal emails at Favro with Slack. We don't send a
Wow.
single internal email.
Wow.
And that's all because of Slack. So, and I think it's interesting, I mean, you probably know that Slack started as it was actually like a failed game company.
Yes.
And I love that, because many of the people at Favro have a game development background. So the whole like game heritage, doing like a business application, I think that's great. And yeah, so yeah, I Slack has definitely made life much better, when you're a business person.
Is there anything else that you want to mention on today's podcast?
No, I mean, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So what's in the background? You have collaboration, communication, participation. See, This is so you kind of like did the Agile Manifesto, but like new version.
Yeah. They're good values.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks.